They didn't just steal my house, they erased my existence. My name is Rachel Sullivan, and I was the invisible daughter. While I worked my whole life to earn everything I had, my parents secretly forged my signature, sold the lake house my grandfather left me, and funneled every cent into my sister's $15,000 wedding. They smiled while I stood in silence. But this isn't a story of quiet suffering. This is the story of what happens when the forgotten one finally fights back. If you've ever felt discarded by the people meant to protect you, you're not alone. Stay with me. I never expected to inherit anything from my family. Not affection, not approval, and certainly not property. That's just how it had always been. So when the lawyer read Grandpa Ed's will and said to my granddaughter Rachel Sullivan, "I leave the lake house and all its contents," the room fell into a silence that felt louder than any scream. I was 36 years old, single by choice, and a successful architect who had built my own firm from scratch. I wasn't flashy. I didn't post my life online or chase validation, but I had carved out something solid for myself on my own terms. And the lake house was the only place where I'd ever felt truly seen. Grandpa Ed wasn't like the rest of the family. He was quiet, observant, and steady, the kind of man who built his own dock with bare hands and believed more in actions than words. He taught me how to saw wood, how to patch drywall, how to drive a boat. But more than that, he taught me how to listen to nature, to people, and to myself. While my parents were always too wrapped up in my younger sister, Vanessa's constant dramas and delicate emotions, Grandpa Ed noticed me. Every summer from the age of 6, I'd spend weeks at the lake house with him. Mornings started with pancakes and quiet fishing. Afternoons were for canoe rides, reading by the fireplace, or building birdhouses. Evenings were slow and peaceful, filled with long talks on the dock while the sun disappeared behind the trees. It wasn't just a house, it was where I learned how to be okay with myself. So when he passed away and I got the call about the will reading, I didn't think much of it. I assumed the house would be sold and the money split. That's what people did in our family, made practical decisions, avoided sentiment, but then came that line to Rachel Sullivan. The pause afterward was suffocating. I could feel my mother stiffened beside me, her fake smile frozen in place. My father's jaw tightened, his hand clenching the chair, and Vanessa, always the center of everything, just blinked as if someone had slapped her without touching her. "She always did love the lake," the lawyer added, almost as an afterthought. No one said a word. I managed a polite thank you, but inside, my mind raced. Why me? Why just me? Later, as we stood outside the law office, my mother broke the silence. "How thoughtful of your grandfather," she said with a voice dipped in sweet poison. "He always had a soft spot for you." Vanessa crossed her arms. "It's just weird, I spent summers there too. Not like I did," I wanted to say. "You hated the bugs, the silence, the lack of cell service. You begged to go home after 2 days, but I kept quiet as always." Even then, a sliver of unease crept into my gratitude. I was thankful, truly, but I couldn't shake the look on my parents' faces. Not hurt, not disappointment, calculation, as if something had just been taken from them that they'd assumed was already theirs. Still, I didn't push. I visited the lake house the next weekend, unlocked the front door, and inhaled that familiar scent of pine and fireplace. His fishing rod still hung above the mantel. His old boots sat by the back door, and his presence lingered, stronger than grief, more comforting than memory. I stood on the dock at sunset, the sky bleeding pink and gold into the water, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa." But something inside me still whispered back, "Be careful." Growing up in the Sullivan household meant knowing your place, and mine was somewhere between invisible and inconvenient. From the age of 10, I was making my own lunches, signing my own permission slips, and walking myself to school. If I wanted new clothes, I babysat the neighbor's twins. If I needed help with homework, I figured it out. My parents weren't cruel, they were just distracted by Vanessa. She cried easily, bruised quickly, and mastered the art of being fragile. At 5, she was diagnosed with a sensitive temperament, a label my mother treated like a royal decree. Vanessa needed quiet. Vanessa needed her own room. Vanessa needed undivided attention. And so Rachel learned how to disappear without making a sound. By the time we were teenagers, the gap between us had widened into a canyon. While I worked 2 jobs to save for a summer architecture camp, Vanessa got ballet lessons. Weekend getaways with Mum and a car for her 16th birthday. I applied for scholarships and filled out college applications alone. She took a gap year to find herself in Europe, fully funded by our parents. And yet, despite everything, I never let bitterness take root. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was the lake house, maybe it was Grandpa Ed who reminded me every summer that my worth had nothing to do with how loud I was or how many tears I shed. Still, even after inheriting the lake house, I tried to maintain some kind of bridge with my family. When Vanessa got engaged to Brent, a trust fund baby turned wellness entrepreneur, I reached out first. If you want, the lake house would make a gorgeous backdrop for your engagement photos, I texted, attaching a few scenic shots of the dock and the fire pit. She replied a day later with a simple, "Thanks, but we've already booked a vineyard. It's more curated." Cured, as if the lake house was a rustic relic rather than a sacred space, but I let it go, chalking it up to her taste. She'd always preferred glamour to authenticity. 2 weeks later, I drove up to the lake house for a long weekend. Fall was settling in, red leaves floating on the water, the air crisp with wood smoke. It was my sanctuary now more than ever. But as I turned onto the gravel path, something felt off. The gate was slightly ajar, which was strange. I always locked it. At first I thought maybe I'd forgotten, but then I noticed tire tracks, fresh and not mine. I parked, its heart thudding. The door was locked, but the doormat was crooked, and a few pine needles had been disturbed in a pattern that suggested movement. Inside, everything looked mostly untouched, mostly. The throw blanket I usually kept folded on the armchair was draped over the back of the couch. A mug sat in the sink. A faint trace of perfume lingered. Not mine. Later that day, I ran into Mrs. Cartwright, the elderly neighbour from across the cove. She was walking her dog along the trail that wrapped behind our properties. "Oh, Rachel, good to see you, dear," she chirped. "Was that your cousin visiting last week? The young woman with the red car?" I blinked. "I haven't been up in a month." She looked confused. "Oh, well, someone was here. She parked by the boathouse and stayed for a few days. I assumed she had your permission." I smiled thinly. Of course, probably Vanessa checking something for the wedding. But as I walked away, the unease in my chest hardened into something sharper. Vanessa hadn't mentioned visiting, and she certainly didn't drive a red car. Vanessa called it the wedding of the century before she even picked a date. From the moment Brent slipped that gaudy 3-carat diamond ring on her finger, she transformed into a full-time bride. There were Pinterest boards, fabric swatches, vision binders, yes, actual binders, and a string of meetings with planners, florists, photographers, and stylists that would have made a celebrity assistant sweat. My parents were enthralled. I hadn't seen them this animated in years. My mother beamed as she described the rehearsal dinner themes. My father spent weekends vetting valet services for the reception. It was as if they were all starring in a glossy magazine spread called How to Throw the Perfect Wedding and Spend a Small Fortune Doing It. Every time I visited, the dining table was buried under calligraphy samples and colour palettes. The fridge had a magnet with a countdown timer labelled "Days Until I Do" in gold script. And yet somehow my name never came up. Not for help, not for input, not even for opinion. One night over dinner, I offered, "I'd love to contribute something. I know weddings get expensive fast. I can pitch in a few thousand, maybe cover the floral arrangements or music." My mother looked startled, then softened into a too sweet smile. "Oh, Rachel, that's generous, but we've got it covered, really." Vanessa nodded absently, eyes glued to her phone. Yeah, don't stress about it. Brent's parents are chipping in, and Mum and Dad already set aside enough. Set aside enough. My parents had always been careful with money, frugal even. When I was in college and my laptop crashed mid-finals, they told me to make do at the library. When my car broke down during my first internship, I took out a high-interest loan to fix it, but now suddenly there was enough for a luxury wedding. I tried to shake it off. Maybe they'd been saving for years. Maybe they wanted to give Vanessa the dream day I never cared about. I wasn't bitter. I didn't even like big weddings, but I couldn't ignore the growing sense that this family celebration had no room for me. At brunch the following Sunday, the guest list came up. Vanessa was explaining her seating chart strategy. Influential people close to the front for photos, fluff guests toward the back. When I gently asked, "Do you need help coordinating travel for out-of-town guests? I can—" "Oh," she interrupted. "That's sweet, but it's already handled." I tried again. "How about designing the programs or signage? That's sort of in my wheelhouse." Vanessa blinked. "We hired a design team. They're doing everything custom." "Sorry." She wasn't sorry. My parents sipped mimosas, oblivious or pretending to be. I sat back, the words catching in my throat. I was being excluded from my own sister's wedding, not out of malice, but indifference, like I wasn't even on their radar. That night, I walked past my childhood bedroom, the one that had been turned into Vanessa's yoga studio, and paused. On the wall was a corkboard filled with swatches from her wedding theme: ivory, blush, sage green, no trace of the lake house, no photo, no connection. The realization settled in like dust. I wasn't just being left out of the wedding. I was being left out of the family story again. Vanessa's Instagram turned into a wedding-themed luxury catalogue. She posted daily close-ups of hand-calligraphed invitations with wax seals, champagne tastings at a Napa estate, drone footage of the resort where the reception would be held. Everything was captioned with breathy gratitude and hashtags like #BrideLife, Vanessa and Brent, Dream Wedding. Then came the dress reveal. A full video montage showcased her trip to Milan to have a couture gown crafted by the hands of Italian artisans. She wrote with a dramatic slow-motion twirl on a marble staircase. The gown covered in intricate lace and Swarovski crystals cost more than my first car. The comments rolled in hearts, fire emojis, queen energy from influencers and acquaintances alike. One even wrote, "You're so lucky your family made this possible." Another day, she posted her honeymoon plans. 3 weeks in Iceland, staying in glass-roofed lodges to watch the northern lights. I recognized one of the resorts. A colleague had once told me it cost nearly $2,000 per night. That evening, I sat in my living room, scrolling in stunned silence. The numbers weren't adding up. Brent's family had money, sure, but new money. Flashy, unstable. His dad owned a string of startup gyms that had already cycled through 2 rebrands. As for my own parents, their finances were always just enough, never extravagant. Where was this tidal wave of funding coming from? My phone buzzed. It was a message from Marissa, a mutual friend from college. "Hey, just saw Vanessa's wedding content. OMG, it's insane. You are seriously the best sister ever. She told me you're helping out big time financially." "That's amazing, Ra." My blood ran cold. I stared at the message for a full minute before replying, "What exactly did she say?" Marissa responded almost instantly, "Just that you made a huge sacrifice to support her big day. Honestly, I wish my sister was half as generous." I didn't answer because I hadn't given a cent except that small offer over brunch, the one they turned down. My mind spun. Had Vanessa misunderstood something? Maybe Mum and Dad mentioned my name to soften their own financial contribution. Maybe. But the thought snapped into clarity like glass shattering. Someone had told people I paid for the wedding. Not only was I excluded from decisions, I was being used as a symbol of generosity. I was being cast as the devoted big sister funding the fairy tale while actually standing on the outside looking in. And the worst part, no one had bothered to ask my permission. I couldn't sit still. That night after Marissa's message, I barely slept. My thoughts were tangled, restless. I kept hearing her words. She told me, "You're helping out big time financially," like they were spoken through a megaphone pressed to my chest. At dawn, I made a decision. I needed to be at the lake house. I needed to see it, feel it, make sure it was still mine. The drive up from Boston took just over 3 hours, though it felt much longer with my heart thudding behind my ribs the entire way. I hadn't been there in nearly 2 months, and each turn of the familiar road offered some comfort until I reached the last curve. That's when I saw the moving truck. It was a tall white box truck parked haphazardly on the gravel path, its ramp down, its back wide open. Strangers, 2 men and a woman, were hauling furniture down the steps of my porch. My porch. I slammed the brakes, tires spitting dust. For a moment, I just sat in the car, frozen. Then I got out. "Excuse me," I called, my voice high, shaky. "What the hell is going on?" The woman turned first. She was maybe in her 40s, stylish, wearing sunglasses and a Boston Red Sox cap. She gave me a hesitant smile, as if I were a neighbor coming to complain about the noise. "Oh, hi there," she said. "Are you from the HOA?" "No, I'm Rachel Sullivan. This is my property." The man behind her stopped mid-lift and looked at her, confused. There was a moment of silence before she slowly pulled off her sunglasses. "Wait, what?" I said. "This is my house," I repeated. "This is my grandfather's lake house. He left it to me. I don't know who you are, but you're trespassing." The man sat down the coffee table he was carrying and stepped forward holding a folder under one arm. "I think we need to talk," he said. "I'm David Grant. My wife Laura and I just bought this place. We closed on it 2 weeks ago." I blinked. "No, that's not possible." He opened the folder and handed me a printed packet. I scanned the first page and my blood chilled. There it was, my name, Rachel Sullivan, listed as the seller, and underneath it a signature. My signature, or what looked like it. "This is wrong," I whispered. "This is not mine. I didn't sign this." "Are you sure?" Laura asked gently. "We went through a realtor, and your parents were listed as your agents. We assumed they're not," I snapped. "They have no legal rights to this house. I inherited it directly from my grandfather. I pay the property taxes. I maintain the grounds. This is mine." David frowned. "We didn't know. Everything went through so smoothly. We were told you lived abroad and handled the sale remotely." I almost laughed. A dry, bitter laugh that didn't make it past my lips. I flipped through more pages, each one twisting the knife deeper. My forged signature appeared again and again on the deed, on disclosure forms, on transfer documents, all notarized, all stamped, all lies. I need to make a call," I said, barely breathing. "I need to speak to my lawyer." "Of course," Laura said. "We're so sorry. We thought everything was above board." But I wasn't listening anymore. I walked down to the dock, phone in hand, and sank onto the edge, my legs hanging off, feet inches above the water. The lake shimmered under the late afternoon sun. That same dock I'd sat on with Grandpa Ed, that same view we'd watched summer after summer, and now gone, sold out from under me by the people who were supposed to protect me. I wasn't crying, not yet. The shock was too big, too sharp. My hands trembled as I finally pressed the contact for Stephanie, my attorney. She picked up on the first ring. "I think my parents forged my signature and sold my house," I said. Silence. "Rachel, say that again." "They sold the lake house. I'm standing on the dock. Strangers are moving in. They have papers with my name, my signature, but it's not mine." "Oh my God," she said. "Okay, stay there. Don't confront anyone else. I'll call the county records office. We're going to sort this out, I promise." But in that moment, standing on the dock, nothing felt fixable, only broken. The county clerk's office smelled like dust and old toner. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright for the heaviness sitting in my chest. I'd driven straight there from the lake house, still in shock, still running on fumes and adrenaline. Stephanie, my attorney, was already waiting when I arrived, holding a legal pad and her own storm cloud of anger. "Are you ready for this?" she asked gently. I wasn't, but I nodded. The clear was a woman in her 60s named Linda, with round glasses and a voice like gravel. She pulled the file from a cabinet and laid it flat on the counter. "Transfer of deed recorded here," she said, tapping a date. "Seller listed as Rachel Sullivan. Buyer David and Laura Grant, notarized in Middlesex County." Stephanie leaned over my shoulder. "Can we see the original deed file and the notarized paperwork?" Linda handed it over without hesitation. I took one look at the signature and felt the air drain from my lungs. It was almost convincing, an imitation of my cursive, but with subtle differences. The S in Sullivan was too wide. The R in Rachel leaned wrong. "That's not me," I said quietly. Stephanie pulled out her phone and opened a document from her cloud storage. "This is a scan of Rachel's actual signature from the inheritance paperwork 5 years ago. Compare." Linda adjusted her glasses. "Oh yeah, that's not the same, not even close." Then came the notary stamp. Stephanie narrowed her eyes. "We'll need to contact this notary directly. If this is fake, it's not just forgery. It's fraud, conspiracy, and likely identity theft." I looked up, heart hammering. "How do we stop the sale? If we can prove the signature is forged, the entire sale becomes void," Stephanie explained. "It's an illegal transaction, but it'll take time, weeks, maybe months, and the buyers will have to be compensated." "They're victims too," I muttered, suddenly feeling terrible for David and Laura Grant. They had no idea they were walking into a war zone. "Yes," Stephanie said, "but the priority is getting your property back." While she started making calls to the notary's listed number, I pulled out my phone to check my bank account. I hadn't touched my savings since this whole mess started, but something compelled me to log in. What I saw made my stomach twist. 3 failed login attempts, all within the past 48 hours, all from an IP address I didn't recognize. I clicked on more details. The access attempts came from a location 20 minutes away from my parents' house. I swallowed hard and called my bank immediately. "Thank you for alerting us," the rep said. "We've placed a temporary freeze on your account while we investigate. We'll also open a fraud report." When I hung up, I looked at Stephanie. "They're trying to get into my bank account." Her head whipped around. "What? I just checked. 3 failed attempts. Not from me. The location's near my parents' place." She sat down hard, scribbling notes. "Okay, this is more than a one-time forgery. They're targeting your assets systematically. They've crossed multiple legal lines. And if it's not just them," she paused. "What do you mean? What if it's not just my parents? What if someone else, Vanessa, Brent, helped, or worse, orchestrated this?" Stephanie didn't answer right away. "Let's take this step by step," she said finally. "First, we document everything. Every login attempt, every forged signature, every unauthorized action. We build an airtight case." I nodded, but something inside me was breaking. The lake house was one thing, but this was an attack on who I was, my identity, my safety. And it wasn't over yet. I wasn't just betrayed, I was hunted. The Langford Hotel ballroom looked like it had been plucked straight from a celebrity tabloid. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting soft light onto a room filled with white orchids, gold-trimmed linens, and a string quartet tucked beneath a staircase like a curated secret. Servers glided past with trays of champagne flutes and miniature caviar toasts. This was no engagement party. It was a spectacle, a branding event disguised as a celebration. I arrived 10 minutes late intentionally. My pale blue dress felt understated in a sea of gowns that shimmered like water under moonlight. As I stepped inside, a wave of heat and perfume hit me. I almost turned around. "Rachel, you made it!" Vanessa appeared beside me in a form-fitting ivory gown that could have passed for a wedding dress. Her arms opened wide for a hug I couldn't dodge without causing a scene. She smelled like expensive jasmine and entitlement. "Isn't this amazing?" she beamed. "Just wait until you see the cake." I gave a tight smile. "It's a lot." She didn't hear me or didn't care. Before I could ask where my parents were, she grabbed my hand and dragged me toward the center of the ballroom. "Everyone's dying to meet you." We passed clusters of guests laughing loudly, air kissing, clinking glasses. I recognized almost no one. Everyone looked curated, filtered, like they'd been selected, not based on relationship, but on aesthetic. I spotted my parents near a champagne fountain, deep in conversation with a woman holding a tablet and wearing a headset. The wedding planner, I guessed. I approached slowly, just close enough to overhear. "The fireworks show will add 20 grand, the planner said, "but the photo's absolutely worth it. Plus, we secured that limited garden space for cocktail hour. Another 5, my father nodded. "Let's add both. Vanessa deserves the best." My mother hesitated. "Are we sure, Tom? We're all ready." "The lake house covered it," he said firmly. "We can float the rest on the equity line." I froze. The lake house covered it. I wanted to scream. Instead, I slipped back into the crowd before they saw me. I spent the next half hour circulating with a drink in hand, saying little, smiling less. Every laugh around me sounded false. Every compliment about the decor felt like a slap. Then came the clink of a spoon against crystal. Vanessa and Brent stood on a small stage beside the custom monogrammed ice sculpture. Vanessa raised her glass and gestured for silence. "I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate our love," she began, voice perfectly modulated for the microphone. "We're so grateful to have each of you here as we begin this next chapter." Brent nodded, his arm draped over her shoulder like a campaign ad. Vanessa continued, "We want to especially thank my amazing parents who have made this whole dream possible." Applause. My parents beamed. "And most of all," she said, turning toward me, "I want to thank my sister Rachel." My spine went rigid. She did something extraordinary, something I never expected, and something I'll never forget. I shook my head slightly, not understanding. She sold the lake house my grandfather left her, our childhood retreat, just so Brent and I could have the wedding of our dreams. That level of generosity, it's humbling. Gasps, applause. People turned to look at me with admiration, nodding, smiling. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Vanessa raised her glass toward me. "To Rachel, the best sister a girl could ask for." The room erupted. Brent added, "We love you, Ra." I stared at them, unable to respond. The blood drained from my face. They hadn't just stolen my house. They'd rewritten the story. I slipped out of the ballroom before dessert. The applause still.
Top 3 Amazing Facts. Fact number 1. दुनिया का सबसे मैला आदमी जो 60 साल से नहाया नहीं था, नहाने के कुछ महीनों बाद ही 94 साल की उम्र में मर गया। वह स्वच्छ भोजन से भी दूर रहता था और सिर्फ मरे जानवरों को खाता था। उसका कहना था, साफ सफाई उसे बीमार कर सकती है। फैक्ट नंबर 2. दुनिया का सबसे महंगा जूता गोल्ड ओवियो एक्स एयर जॉर्डन है, जिसकी कीमत 16 करोड़ रुपए है। ये पूरी तरह से सोने का बना है और इसका वजन 20 किलो है। फैक्ट नंबर 3. यदि आप रोज खाली पेट सिर्फ 1 महीने तक किशमिश का पानी पीते हैं, तो यह आपके खून को साफ कर देता है, जिसके कारण आपकी त्वचा चमकने लगती है और सारे कील मुहासे धीरे धीरे गायब हो जाते हैं।
Ethereal version of a pop song. Vanessa walked down the aisle like she was descending from heaven. Brent waiting at the altar in a designer tux, blinking back rehearsed emotion. I stood beside her as she exchanged vows. She cried just enough to be charming. Brent's voice cracked at all the right places. Everyone sighed a seed. The priest pronounced them husband and wife, and thunderous applause filled the church. Cameras flashed, doves released from the front steps. Outside, vintage Rolls-Royce cars waited to transport the bridal party to the reception at the Marlowe estate. A sprawling mansion turned event space overlooking the cliffs. The cocktail hour was held in the terrace gardens, complete with a raw oyster bar, champagne tower, and live harpist. I watched guests marvel at the view, sipping champagne like royalty. Every detail was perfection, every flower arranged by hand, every dish plated like art. And everywhere I looked, there was a reminder. The monogrammed menu cards bought with my house, the 10-piece band flown in from New York, bought with my house, the drone cameras circling above for cinematic footage, bought with my house. I sat through dinner, a 5AC course meal with gold leaf on the dessert, listening to toast after toast. Brent's best man told childhood stories. Vanessa's maid of honor sobbed about their unbreakable bond. My parents beamed like royalty. Then Vanessa stood. She tapped her crystal glass and faced the crowd, her new husband holding her hand. "I just want to say one more thank you," she said, her voice warm, soft, perfectly amplified. "To someone very special, someone who made this day possible." I felt 100 eyes shift toward me before she even said my name. "To my sister Rachel, you gave up something priceless so we could have this. You made the biggest sacrifice and I'll never forget it." Another round of applause. A few people stood. My mother dabbed her eyes. My father raised his glass toward me, lips mouthing "thank you." I nodded. That was all I could do because every word was a lie. Every smile was theft. And yet I smiled back, played the part, held the mask a little longer. But beneath the surface, the storm had never stopped brewing. And tomorrow, they'd all see what I'd really been planning. At exactly 8:00 a.m. the next morning, I pressed send. 2 emails left my outbox simultaneously. One went to my parents, subject line, notice of legal action. The other to our extended family, a simple, sharp title, the truth behind Vanessa's wedding. I had barely finished my coffee when my phone started vibrating like a ticking bomb. Call after call, texts piling in. My father first, then my mother, then again alternating like a panic metronome. I didn't answer. I'd already said everything I needed to say in the documents, in the evidence, and most importantly, in the letter I had spent days crafting with my lawyer. It was attached to the email and read, "Mum, Dad, you didn't just sell a house. You sold the last place in the world where I felt safe. The lake house wasn't a property. It was Grandpa's legacy. It was the summers he spent teaching me how to build, how to breathe. You took it, forged my name, and funded a wedding that I wasn't even allowed to participate in. Then you paraded me in front of everyone like a willing donor. You stole from me, and you lied to everyone about it. What's worse, you assumed I wouldn't fight back. You assumed I would stay quiet like I always did, but I'm done being the silent daughter." The documents attached include evidence of fraud, forgery, and financial misrepresentation. The notary has confirmed the signature is not legitimate. My bank has flagged suspicious activity tied to your address. The buyers of the lake house are cooperating in reversing the sale. You will be liable for damages, attorney fees, and criminal penalties unless a settlement is reached. Additionally, I've informed the rest of the family. They deserve to know the truth about what happened and about who you really are. I will be pursuing this to the full extent of the law. Do not contact me unless it's through legal counsel. Rachel. By 10:00 a.m., my Aunt Judith had responded with a single sentence. "I am so sorry. We had no idea. My cousin Ben sent me a voice note full of anger, not at me, but on my behalf. They made you look like a hero while gutting you behind the scenes," he said. "This is beyond cruel." And then at 10:17 a.m., the final nauseating twist landed in my inbox. Stephanie forwarded me a document she'd obtained from a financial investigator. It was a loan agreement, a personal line of credit, $85,000, taken out under my name. "Rachel," she said on the phone, voice tight with fury. "This was filed 3 months ago. It uses your social security number, your signature, but the handwriting matches the forged deed, and the IP address used to file the digital application traces back to your parents' home." I couldn't speak. They used you. she continued, not just for the lake house, but to access more cash, possibly for the honeymoon or other wedding expenses. We're still tracing the funds. I stared at the ceiling, a strange calm wrapping around my bones. There it was, the confirmation that this wasn't a moment of poor judgment. It was a pattern, a scheme, a crime. I wasn't even a person to them anymore. I was a resource, a bank account, a vault they thought they could breach without consequence. The sorrow I'd carried, like a heavy fog, evaporated instantly. What replaced it was steel. I wasn't the daughter who stayed quiet. I wasn't the sister who sacrificed. Not anymore. I was the reckoning. They scheduled the emergency family meeting at my parents' house Sunday at afternoon, 2 p.m. sharp, the same house where I'd eaten birthday cake as a child, the same one where my old room had been converted into Vanessa's yoga studio. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't go alone. Stephanie arrived with me, dressed in muted grey, carrying a briefcase and a folder thicker than a phone book. Her presence changed the atmosphere immediately. I wasn't just the angry daughter, I was the plaintiff. Inside, the room was tense. My parents sat on one side of the long dining table, expressions tight. Vanessa and Brent sat next to them, newly returned from their honeymoon, both looking far less radiant than they had at the wedding. A few aunts and uncles lingered nearby, clearly uncomfortable, as if they were attending a funeral they hadn't dressed for. No one spoke when we entered. I placed my laptop in the center of the table and connected it to the large screen in the living room. Stephanie took her seat beside me. We didn't exchange pleasantries. I'm going to walk everyone through what happened, I said calmly. I recommend you don't interrupt. No one moved. I clicked play on the first slide, a scan of the deed transfer for the lake house. This is the forged signature, I began. Compare it to my real one, slide 2, side-by-side samples. I could hear a few gasps. Slide 3, notarization details. This notary has confirmed under oath that she never authorized this form. Her stamp was used without consent. Slide 4, bank statement. This is my savings account. These are the 3 failed login attempts. The IP address traced back to this house. Slide 5, the $85,000 loan application. This is a loan opened in my name. Forged again, approved using my social security number, then routed into a joint account shared by my parents. I looked up. No one blinked. Vanessa had gone pale. Slide 6, email screenshots, Instagram captions, messages from friends thanking me for a gift I never gave. Slide 7, a recorded audio file. I hit play, the room filled with the sound of my father's voice recorded outside the engagement party. She won't do anything, she never does. Then my mother, she doesn't have it in her. When it ended, silence dropped like an anchor. My aunt reached for her glass of water with shaking hands. My uncle stared at the floor. Vanessa finally whispered, "I didn't know." I turned to her. "You stood in front of a room of 200 people and thanked me for something I never gave. You never once asked. You never once checked." Tears welled in her eyes. "They told me you agreed that it was your gift to me. And you believe that?" My voice was steady, razor sharp. "You thought I would give up the lake house, my inheritance, my sanctuary for your wedding without even speaking to me. I didn't want to ruin the story," she said quietly. That hit harder than anything. The story. That's what I'd been to them. A character, a role, the responsible sister, the silent one, the reliable plot device in someone else's narrative. My father finally spoke. "Rachel, we made a mistake." "No," Stephanie cut in, voice cool and precise. "You committed multiple felonies." He blinked. "I could press charges today," she added. "Forgery, wire fraud, identity theft. You're lucky your daughter is willing to speak to you at all." The room was heavy with shame. No one argued. No one defended. And for the first time in my life, I had the floor and the power to decide what came next. I took a breath, the kind that comes just before you drop the final verdict. My gaze swept across the room. No one met my eyes. Not my parents, not Vanessa, not Brent. Even the uncles and aunts looked away, as if the walls were suddenly more interesting than the wreckage of our family legacy playing out in front of them. "This is what I want," I said, voice steady. "First, I want my house back. That's non-negotiable. You will compensate the buyers fully with interest, and the title will return to me." My father nodded quickly, as if relieved to have a number to chase. "Second," I continued, "you will repay the money you stole every cent from the loan taken out in my name and the damage to my credit. I want that cleared with a formal letter from your lawyer, taking full responsibility." Stephanie tapped her notes as I spoke, keeping pace. "Third," I said, turning toward my mother, "you will issue a public apology to every guest who attended that wedding, to every family member you misled. Not just a text, not a call, a written statement acknowledging what you did." Her lips trembled. She gave a barely perceptible nod. "And last," I said, "you will attend therapy together a minimum of 6 months. You will go as a condition of any settlement, and you will go willingly." The room was dead silent. Then my mother broke down. Not the dramatic crying I'd seen at family events. This was silent, shoulder-shaking sobs, the kind that came from somewhere deep, twisted with guilt and exhaustion. My father put a hand on her back, but he looked hollow, like someone had just ripped the frame off the picture he thought he was painting. "We're sorry," he whispered, eyes glassy. "We were wrong. We never thought you'd fight back," I asked. "That was the problem, wasn't it?" Across the table, Vanessa looked like a ghost. "I didn't know," she repeated, a whisper now. "I swear I didn't know about the loan. I thought they were just being generous for once. I wanted to believe it." She stared at my parents, betrayal etched into her face. "You told me she offered it. You said Rachel didn't want the house. You've always believed what made things easier," I said to her. "Not Croy, just honestly. That's your version of silence." She collapsed into Brent's arms, sobbing now, the mascara-stained tear-seen truth unraveling down her cheeks. Then came the twist no one expected. Aunt Diane, one of my mother's oldest sisters, quiet until now, cleared her throat. "I wasn't going to say anything," she began, voice shaky. "But this isn't the first time." Heads turned. "What are you talking about?" my father asked. Diane looked at me. "Years ago, after Grandpa Leo died, there was a dispute over a piece of land in Vermont. I thought it was an honest paperwork mix-up, but now I remember things. Your parents told everyone I signed off on the sale, but I never did." The room froze. "They sold it," she said, "and they used the money to refinance their second home. I let it go. I didn't have the energy to fight, but hearing all this, I think I was wrong to stay quiet." My mother looked like she'd been punched. That was different. She stammered. "It always is," Diane said, and sat back in her chair. My chest tightened, not with sadness, but with clarity. This wasn't an isolated event. It wasn't even just about me. This was a pattern, long-standing, calculated, and cruel. Stephanie turned to me. "Do you want to add charges?" "No," I said after a pause. "I got what I came for. I stood. But I'm done playing the daughter role," I said quietly. "I'm done attending holidays, done with group texts, done pretending we're okay when we're not." Vanessa looked up. "And please don't shut me out. I'm not shutting anyone out," I said. "I'm just stepping back. Boundaries aren't punishment, they're survival." And with that, I left the house. Not in anger, not in victory, but in resolve. The past no longer owned me, neither did they. The lake house came back to me in late spring. The legal proceedings had dragged for nearly 5 months. Forms, filings, negotiated settlements, and a surprisingly quiet capitulation from my parents once the evidence stacked too high to scale. The Grants, the couple who had unknowingly purchased my stolen legacy, were gracious in a way that left me grateful and guilty at once. They accepted the settlement, packed up, and left the house just as the lilacs bloomed near the front porch. When I turned the key and stepped inside again, alone, the air smelled different. Not bad, just unfamiliar. The furniture had shifted, the warmth rearranged, their art still hung on a few walls. A new coffee maker sat on the kitchen counter. The beds had fresh linens. Someone else had called this place home. But now it was mine again. The first thing I did was open every window. Sunlight poured in through the tall panes, dousing the wood floors in gold. A breeze swept through like breath returning to lungs. I didn't cry. I thought I might. But instead, I moved. I scrubbed the kitchen tile grout with an old toothbrush. I washed every curtain, repainted the living room in the same sage green Grandpa had once picked. I patched nail holes in the walls and replaced the knobs on the bathroom cabinets. Each task, each small act of care, was a stitch in a wound too deep for bandages. I planted herbs in the window box. I sanded the dock by hand. I replaced a cracked step on the porch. I rewired a flickering light fixture. I found Grandpa's old fishing rod still tucked in the boathouse rafters. I cleaned it, oiled it, mounted it above the mantel where it had once hung. Piece by piece, I restored not just the structure, but the soul. And in doing so, I found mine again. I started spending weekends there regularly. I stopped checking social media. I left my phone inside when I walked barefoot through the grass in the early mornings. I read books on the screened-in porch until the sun dipped into the lake. I drank coffee by the fireplace on rainy days. I listened to the silence and realized it wasn't empty. It was healing. One evening, as I sat on the dock with my feet in the water, Stephanie called. "How's the queen of reclaimed real estate?" she teased. "I'm covered in paint and mosquito bites," I said, "but I think this place is saving my life." "You saved it first," she replied. That summer passed slowly, like syrup pouring from a jar. I learned to breathe again, to let go of the sharpest edges. I didn't forgive my parents, not fully, but I stopped bleeding from what they'd done. That I realized was enough. Then in September, the letter arrived. It was from Vanessa, handwritten. "Dear Rachel, I don't know what I'm allowed to say anymore. I don't know what you'll believe, but I hope this reaches you with an open heart. I had a baby girl last week. We named her Edith. Not for fashion, not to make peace, but because when I held her for the first time, I thought of Grandpa Ed, of how he made you feel safe when no one else did. I want my daughter to grow up knowing that kind of love. The real kind, the kind I didn't understand until too late. I don't expect anything from you, but I wanted you to know that your strength changed me. And I hope one day when you're ready, you'll meet her. Love, Vanessa." I read the letter twice, then a third time. I set it down on the table where Grandpa and I once played cards. I didn't cry, but my chest ached with something Noldy and new at once. I wasn't ready to reply. Not yet, but maybe soon. 3 weeks after receiving Vanessa's letter, I found myself standing at the threshold of her home, an airy townhome on the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac. I hadn't responded to the letter directly. I hadn't said yes, but I'd texted simply, "I'm free Sunday afternoon if it's still okay." Her reply came within minutes, "Yes, please." Now here I was clutching a modest bouquet of daisies and eucalyptus, my nerves taut. The door opened before I could knock. Vanessa looked different, not drastically, but softer, paler. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, her sweatshirt loose and stained with something that might have been milk or exhaustion. Her eyes held something I hadn't seen before. Humility. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hi," I replied. We stood in that delicate silence for a breath longer, then she stepped aside. "Come in." The house was clean but lived in. A baby swing rested in the corner beside a stack of unfolded laundry. Bottles lined the counter. A lullaby played softly from a Bluetooth speaker. It was domestic chaos, but it felt real human. "She's sleeping," Vanessa whispered, motioning to the nursery. "But you can see her." I followed her down the hall. Inside the dim room, a white crib sat beneath a mobile of clouds and stars. A tiny form lay swaddled in floral blankets, breathing evenly, peacefully. I stepped closer. She was beautiful. I didn't touch her, just watched. "She looks like you," I murmured. Vanessa's breath hitched. "I hope she's stronger." We sat at the kitchen table, mugs of tea steaming between us. I didn't know how to say thank you, she said. You don't have to, I do. She fiddled with the handle of her mug. I was blind for years. I thought getting what I wanted meant I was loved. I didn't know it came at a cost. Your cost. I nodded slowly. You didn't forge anything, but you benefited from it. I know, she said. I wish I could undo it. You can't. Silence again, not hostile, just honest. I don't hate you, I added, but I'm not ready to pretend everything's fine either. I don't want to pretend. We sipped our tea in the stillness that follows truth. I thought about Grandpa, she said suddenly when I named her Edith. I thought about how he made us both feel like we mattered, like we were whole. He did, I said, even when no one else did. Her eyes welled, but she blinked the tears away. I want her to grow up better, she said. I want her to know family isn't about appearances. It's about boundaries and truth and showing up. I believed her for the first time. I truly did. When I left that afternoon, she hugged me, tentative, no pressure. I returned it, brief but sincere. Healing wasn't a switch, it was a slow, uneven walk, but maybe we'd taken the first step. Later that evening, I returned to the lake house. The sun was beginning to set, casting amber light across the water. I walked to the end of the dock barefoot, the planks warm beneath my soles. The lake rippled gently like it was breathing with me. I sat at the edge, feet dangling above the water, and let the silence settle around me. From the porch, the wind carried the faintest echo of Grandpa Ed's voice, the memory of one of our late-night dock talks, his growly tone cutting through the quiet. Stand your ground, Ra. Some things are worth fighting for. I closed my eyes, smiled, and whispered back, I did, Grandpa. I did.